Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and in this video we are going to draw a really cool watercolor feather in Procreate. So open up the app and let's start drawing. Okay, so the first thing to do is obviously to create a new canvas. Here are the dimensions of the canvas that I am using, but you can really use whichever you need depending on the project that you are working on. The only reasons these are the dimensions, again, that I'm using is because I'm drawing in a pre-textured file that has really cool watercolor paper textures, so that's really just it. But I would definitely recommend trying to get at least 2000 pixel wide so that you can zoom in without losing too much quality. So once you have your canvas, we're going to start by sketching really roughly the feather. So for that, go ahead and create a new layer, rename it to Sketch. If you've watched any of my edit tutorials by now, you probably know that I quite like setting my sketch layer to multiply and lowering the opacity, so might as well do it now instead of later, but you don't have to. It's just a personal little thing that I like to do. And I also like sketching in a gray color, but again, that it's totally up to you. In this tutorial, I will be using my watercolor brushes, which will be linked in the description below, along with a promo code just for you guys, as usual. But I will also be recommending general free brushes from Procreate so that you can still follow along. Don't worry about it. If you have the watercolor brushes, we're going to sketch using the coloring pencil. Otherwise, you can use the HB pencil that comes in the sketching panel. And at this point for the sketch, you can be really quick and loose because we're not going to have it in the final product, so it doesn't matter that much. So you're going to start by drawing the central part of the feather, and then you're going to draw the barbs, I think it's called, so the actual feather. And make sure that the width of that is pretty much the same throughout the entire feather. So you don't want anything pointy or like an arrow shape at all. You just want to have it pretty much the same, and then you're just going to round the top. And once you have the main shape, you can go in and add little details, kind of like when the barbs break away from each other and create this V shape. I personally like keeping them on the same side of my feather. I just think it looks a little bit less messy and just more interesting when they are all on the same side. And yeah, don't go too crazy, not more than 3, I would say. And then you're going to add some fluff at the bottom of the feather. You don't need to be precise again here, we're just sketching to have an idea, but we're going to go in later with the color and make that all nice. And when I say later, I pretty much mean now. So go ahead and create a new layer, put it below the sketch layer, and rename it to feather or color or just something that you're going to remember. We're not going to have a whole lot of layers in here, so it doesn't matter as much. And this layer, you're just going to leave it to normal 100% opacity. If you have the watercolor brushes, go ahead and select the dark edges watercolor. Otherwise, you can go in the airbrushing panel, select the hard brush or the medium brush, and lower the opacity, which is this little slider here on the left or on the right if you are left-handed. And lowering the opacity is going to allow you to get the same overlay effect that you would get with watercolor brushes. You're obviously not going to get any texture, but it is better than nothing, and you might be able to achieve some sort of a watercolory effect with that. That being said, if you have the watercolor brushes, even better, and you can pick pretty much any color of your choice. I'm going with a nice blue color here, but again, pretty much anything that you desire. And all you're going to do is you're going to fill in the color without lifting the pencil, section by section. And why I say don't lift the pencil is since we have this watercolor or opacity effect, anytime that we lift, we're kind of resetting the color, and we're going to create overlay and overlaps, which we're going to use later in the process. But for now, we just want to lay kind of the basic color of the feather. However, if you do get some overlaps like I just had right here, don't worry about it. We're going to fix it in just a few steps, and it's going to look really, really good still. So yes, draw the bulk of the feather, but also don't forget to go in and kind of add the little fluffs at the bottom. I like drawing them very loosely, and don't worry too much about being precise at all. And don't worry again about the overlays. You're going to get some in this section, but that's all good. And also you're going to kind of really quickly and roughly outline the main central part of the feather, kind of the stem, the shaft, whatever. I'm not sure what the proper word is here, but you get what I'm saying. And once you have the base, we're going to go in again and add a little bit of a blotchiness effect to make it feel more like watercolor. So if you don't have the watercolor brushes, just go back and pick the medium brush and maybe the soft brush and lower the opacity again. Otherwise, you're going to use just the color shifting blotches, and with the same color you've been using, you're just going to add some spots of color. So this is going to help, like I was saying, create this watercolor effect, and it's just going to make the drawing more interesting and have a little bit more happening and stuff going on, basically. And this is another step where you don't have to be super precise. We're going to blend it pretty much now, actually. So once you're done with your blotches, go ahead and hide the sketch layer, and if you don't have the watercolor brushes, you're going to set your smudge tool to a soft brush. If you have the watercolor brushes, go ahead and set your paintbrush to the water blender, and you're just going to go over well, first of all, the overlays. So making sure that those digital overlays are a thing of the past. You might also want to go over some other parts of your feather. I kind of like to blend in one side of the shaft, I guess. So keeping one edge of that really nice and sharp, but then the other edge is blending it in. I think that's a good look. And especially if you don't have the watercolor brushes, you're going to have to go over your splotches that we just created in the last step so that they blend in better and actually become splotches. So here, basically what we're doing, if I'm kind of doing the analogy of real life watercolor, we would be adding water on top of our pigments so that they blend in together a little bit better. And guys, if you've made it this far in the video, please go ahead and comment the word bird below. I know it sounds crazy, but it gives me a lot of insight in how to edit and pace my videos better, which in the end helps me create better tutorials for you. And also it's really cool for me because you guys know me, but I don't know you. So whenever you comment, I get to see your name and sometimes even your picture, which is really great because I get to see the little drawing community that we are creating here on this channel, and that's super exciting. So go ahead and comment the word bird and let's keep going. So once you have everything nicely blended in, we're going to use the selection tool, set it to freehand, and we're going to add some color variation. So to do that, I like to draw just the random blobby, wobbly shape here. And then using the feather option, feather that selection somewhere, you know, between 20–30%. And using the adjustment panel, hue, saturation, brightness options to the entire layer, you can then shift the hue and make it seem like you have some different pigments in your watercolor paint. So that's really fun. It adds a lot of depth to the piece, and you can also play with the saturation and the brightness a little bit. But for this step, I like to go and pretty much just focus on the hue. Nothing too crazy, just want to make it feel a bit more like natural, real life watercolor. And you can also use the same technique to add some shadows on your feather. So using the selection tool, this time you would probably select kind of the right lower part of your feather, and you're going to feather that selection somewhere between, you know, 15–20% this time maybe. And you're this time going to lower the brightness instead of changing the hue. You might want to lower the saturation a little bit, nothing too crazy, but yeah, you can create really nice, simple shadows that way. Now make sure you look very carefully because I'm going to show you how to add the little patterns on your feather in a very simple way. So this is a super easy trick. You go back to the adjustment panel, again, hue, saturation, and brightness, but this time instead of selecting layer, you select pencil. And you're gonna end up in the same kind of menu that you have in the layer option, but this time you're gonna be able to draw. For that, I like to use the dry ink brush that comes in the inking panel with just the regular Procreate brushes. And I don't touch any of the settings first because I just want to draw kind of a basic rough selection, or I just want to draw my rough pattern, there we go, before adjusting the settings. But you can see here, whatever I'm painting, I am going to kind of change the color of that. So here I'm just going with some stripes on my feather, but you could add some little dots. You could draw pretty much whatever you want on the feather, honestly, using this very simple technique. And once you have your pattern done, you can, just like we did before, shift the hue, the saturation, and the brightness of that pattern. So in my case, I'm just going to make it white, so I'm going to leave the hue at 50%, which is what it was to start with. And then I'm going to up the brightness and maybe lower the saturation, and I'm just going to tweak the settings until I get a color that I like. But you can see here that is a really fun way of creating a super simple pattern on a shape that already exists. So you could go and like make it darker by lowering the brightness. You might want to change the color completely, so you can really play with the settings at the bottom. And once I have a color that I like, I personally like to go back and kind of tweak the pattern a little bit, just so I get something slightly better. But yeah, that's super efficient and it works with pretty much anything that you might be drawing. And you can do this little technique here multiple times. I'm just drawing lighter stripes because I'm just showing you how it works and I don't want the tutorial to last forever. But you could quit, so just tap on the magic wand at the top and then do it again with totally different settings and a different pattern. You could add darker stripe or really anything you want to make your piece a little bit more interesting and intricate. We can also add more details by drawing the actual little lines, so the barbs. And if you want to do that, I recommend that you do it on a separate layer that you're going to rename to details, because I recommend that you change the blending mode of that layer to linear burn, which is just going to help everything blend in a little bit better. And you might want to lower the opacity around 50% as well. For that, you're going to go back to the brush that you use for sketching, so either the HB pencil or the coloring pencil. And with the same color, I like keeping it like a color, not just a gray this time. You're literally going to, with very, very thin pencil, draw the little lines. Make sure that they are not super straight. You do want to have some curve in it. And also make sure that they are not kind of like evenly separated. Make sure that they're not too even. You want them to be kind of clustered in some sections and then have some wider space in other sections. You want it to look a little bit kind of random, but always making sure that they are slightly curved and also pointing upwards, obviously. You also want to maybe outline kind of the area, the little V shapes, to make them even more highly visible. And this is a step that I highly recommend you pause the video to do and take your time to do it. It doesn't have to take 3 hours for sure, but definitely more than 2 minutes. You want to make sure that you take your time, like I was saying, to make this look good, because this is the detail layer. This is kind of all the precision stuff where you're also going to outline the middle part. You're going to add the little fluff at the bottom. So you really want to make sure that you're doing this right, even if it might take you like, a little bit more time, but still it should be fairly quick. And at this point, we're pretty much at the final touches. So if you have the watercolor brushes, you're going to go back and select the salt brush, and on your feather layer, starting from a white section towards the color, you're going to be able to add some really nice white speckles on your piece. So that just adds some texture and just a little bit more of a fun touch to the final result. It is obviously not essential, but I quite like it. And you can also add some splatters. So creating a new layer again, just so that we can change the blending mode of it to linear burn. This time you might not really want to lower the opacity that much, maybe just like 80% or something. And you can rename this layer to splatters. And still with the same color, you're going to draw splatters. Now the thing is, Procreate has a splatter brush, but as you can see here, it doesn't really look that good. There's this giclée brush here that resembles splatters a little bit more, but is super dense. So you could use those if you don't have my watercolor brushes. It's maybe going to work, but if you do have the watercolor brushes, definitely take the splatter brush that comes with it, and you're gonna see you're gonna get just more realistic watercolor splatters that way. You could also draw them individually manually, but yeah. Basically you're just going to add splatters if you want to kind of finish the piece and make everything come together very nicely. And there you go, this was how to draw a watercolor feather in Procreate. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you did, make sure to give it a like because it really does help the channel, and I would love to see what you guys create, so make sure to share the results with me either on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. And before you leave, don't forget to subscribe because I put out new videos just like this one every single week. I'll see you soon.